kid who swings a golf club like a dream. I'd like to try to qualify him for the U.S. Amateurs.
Coming to Apple TV+.
What's your name?
I'm not into older guys, but I'm flattered.
A new comedy series, Stick.
I don't want to go on this trip.
Your mouth's saying one thing, but those eyes are saying something else.
From the home of Ted Lasso.
This is your shot at redemption? This is your mulligan?
Owen Wilson.
This game takes and it takes. The game's finally giving me something back.
Stick.
You know Arnold Palmer?
Iced tea, lemonade, mix it.
I'm missing a nap for this.
Streaming June 4th on Apple TV+.
News team, assemble!
It's back and bigger than ever. It's the Unofficial 40 from Soonerscoop.com. Now, here's the entire Sooner Scoop crew. Carrie, Josh, Eddie, and
George. All right, welcome back. It is another edition of the Unofficial 40 podcast where we're in the upside down world today, ladies and gentlemen. Josh McCuistion is in the studio, and we have George Stoia. I know he's not sitting on a beach. He's got a little background. He's working hard down in Destin, Florida. But George, welcome from afar.
Thanks for having me, guys. I gotta say, guys, this is the best event media-wise to cover. And I don't say that to make you guys jealous, but in terms of availability and also just people watching and specifically coach watching.
Yeah.
And some of the stories you hear about last night at the hotel bar, you know, certain coaches holding court, or
who was putting one
last
on
night at the pool reception, seeing Josh Heupel give a big hug to OU president Joe Harris, and they have a long chat, and you're just a fly on the wall of like what's being said, you know. And I wish I could be inside some of these meetings, because I do think there's some interesting conversations going on. I don't know if anything's actually getting done by these administrators and coaches and stuff, but this is a very interesting few days to cover as just a local media person who's not really here to ask, you know, who prefers what playoff structure. You know, I don't really give a shit about some of that, but it is a very interesting event to cover.
We need to hire the TikTok lip reader girl to go with you next year.
That would be good. That would be good, because there's a lot of that going on. Where we're like, oh, what are they saying over there? You know, so yeah, that's not a bad idea.
You find out what Timothy Chalamet and Ben Stiller are talking about on the courtside in Indianapolis. All right, that means Josh McCuistion is in the studio.
Still, again, George, you know, you weren't here to address this, but as soon as I come to town, I feel like you leave. Like, this is becoming a pattern of behavior. And do we have an issue, George? And I don't know about it.
Yeah, I hate working with you.
Well, I do like the honesty,
wow.
George. I appreciate that. That's
fair. Blazing.
It just happens that way. I'm usually there for summer camps.
Fair, yeah.
Which are going down in another week.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like Josh. Yes. Well, here's the thing. Josh comes to beautiful Norman 2 weeks in a row, and George gets to go to the crappy Destin 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, the first time I went a couple weeks ago was for a wedding, and this one I have yet to to put my feet in the sand, or in the ocean. Now, I will say I got a lot of my work done today, so I might go enjoy that this evening before watching the Thunder game at a local establishment here in Destin. But I don't think I haven't spent much time outside of the hotel this week.
Are you and Barry Trammell going to go watch together?
Barry, the great Barry Trammell, did not think through his flights, I don't think, or at least, you know, we didn't know the schedule of the Western Conference Finals at this point. But he is actually going to be flying during the game tonight.
That's
his
terrible.
Flight's at like 6. Yeah, his flight's at like 6:30. And get this, his flight in to Destin got delayed. He missed pretty much the whole fourth quarter of Game 4. So two unfortunate events for Barry in terms of traveling.
He's at the airport right now. Somebody just sent me a photo of him.
Yes, yeah, he just. I know. I just talked to him about an hour ago, and he was leaving for his first flight, and he's kind of had a nightmare situation. I guess his layover in Dallas, he's not going to be able to make, so now he's on a different flight. So I don't know. I think he's had kind of a bit of a disaster travel wise.
Guys, we're talking about George and the beach. Is it a strong take to say that the beach is just wildly overrated?
No, I completely agree.
I don't understand it. The ocean sucks.
You agree that it is or it is not, Eddie?
It is overrated. I mean, I like going out there and standing around, but after you see it, it's over. I'd rather be on a golf course. I don't understand the appeal. I'd rather be on a golf course.
I think it's for people that don't usually drink, and so they go out there on beach chairs and they have people bring them drinks and they get drunk, and it's like, wow, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
Depends on your beach experience. Because when I was at the wedding a couple weeks ago, we were in Seaside, which is like the most beautiful, beach in America, and the house we were staying in was on the beach, so you could just walk out there and be on there, go get drinks yourself, bring out a 12-pack, no problem, whatever. I do think though that the pool is a much better place. I like the pool. The sand after a while gets old.
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of the sand.
It's you know what I like the beach at night.
Yeah, better. Yeah. Better. Not as hot, not as miserable.
Yeah, it's nice, cool, warm. Breeze.
The sand isn't scorching as hot like that. That's
like
that's
if you can go find yourself like a bottle of wine or something, with friends or woman or whatever, and just go out and hang out and sit on the beach. That's relaxing to me.
Yeah. But yeah, like we go to all the, we go to Mexico or Jamaica or whatever, and we go to these nice resorts. We hang out at the pool. Like we very rarely go to the beach because the beach it's just sand and everything. And ocean water sucks.
I usually can't hang out at the pool at the resort. Do you know why? You can probably guess.
I'm wondering if it's the same reason I don't like it sometimes, because somebody always wants to be social and do the whole like.
Well, it's about the music that they play.
Oh, yeah.
It's always Jimmy Buffett.
Yes, there's a heavy dose.
And my whole thing about Jimmy Buffett is you listen to Jimmy Buffett when you're landlocked. You dream about when you get to the beach, you don't need to listen to Jimmy Buffett because all he's singing about is getting away into paradise. When you're in paradise, you don't need to hear Jimmy Buffett and his crappy music telling you how great it is to be in paradise.
That might be the worst take we've ever had on this program.
Jimmy Buffett is terrible. And I will go to he's already in his grave. I will go to mine saying that I despise Jimmy Buffett.
Wow,
I'm not even a Jimmy Buffett stan. That's just a ridiculous.
You're a big parrot head. That's what you are. All big parrot head.
Not with the hats and shit. But
Eddie doesn't care about music whatsoever.
Yeah, that's fair.
I saw Jimmy Buffett at Red Rocks, and he was awesome.
You shouldn't be able to judge anybody about music, Eddie.
That's a shit take.
I think they're turning on you, Gary.
That's fine. Let's go over your music catalog sometime. Not on this podcast, but we'll just go over it so I can know whether I can value your opinion or not.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, you. Beach Boy.
Well, I think my music taste is pretty good.
Okay. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. All right, so let's talk about SEC meetings going on. It's weird for me to call them spring meetings since we're getting into summer here pretty quick. But I think, George, a lot of people, like you kind of said, a lot of the allure for being there is kind of just getting background. It's things that you can't report or things that you get some background on that to kind of keep in your back pocket for what's coming. But I mean, you are doing a lot of reporting while you're there. Just go to Soonerscoop.com, sign up for $1, and get all the information from there, from the Women's College World Series, Josh's recruiting trip that's going on. I mean, this is one of the busiest times of the year. I mean, it's Wednesday and I'm exhausted. I mean, we've been going at it morning, noon, and night. Eddie and I were here till very late last night. I think I watched the game 4. I didn't leave until it was over because we were just working on video and stuff. And it was just easier to stay here and watch it. But kind of, George, just sum up a little bit of what you've been able to report and what you've been able to gather from out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides of this. Is one, the team-specific stuff. I got to talk to Brent for quite a while, and I went over what he talked about yesterday on the show, so make sure you check that out on YouTube. But he covered a lot of different topics from national stuff, I mean, that's been the big talk this week, especially with the football coaches, wanting to get rid of the spring transfer portal, how many, conference games should they play? How big should the playoff be? I know Brian Kelly talked a little bit today about wanting to play Big Ten schools in a 9+1 format, all that stuff. But I was a little bit more interested in the team-specific stuff with Brent, and I actually talked to Brent for a few extra minutes today as he was leaving the hotel and got some more stuff. But, that's been really good, as well as, talked to Joe C. for over an hour yesterday about all sorts of stuff. And, I will say this, Kerry, a little tidbit. Tomorrow the kickoff times come out for the first 3 games, and I believe OU Texas will be released as well. And I'm just going to say this. I think that, and I don't know for sure, but I think OU fans are going to like the kickoff times that are released tomorrow night. Or I don't know if it's tomorrow night or sometime tomorrow. But that's going to come out. And,
so this will be conference-wide. Everybody in the SEC will have their non-con times revealed?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. I think it's the first 3 games for everybody will be released. I don't know if that includes all non-con games, but those will be released tomorrow. And from what I understand, I think OU got a pretty good draw on those. But just stuff like that. And again, like I said, and we can go into whatever topic you guys want to. But lots of playoff talk. That's been the main thing, and kind of just waiting to see what happens with the House settlement, because if that were to get approved today or tomorrow, that could obviously change kind of what some of these meetings have been about. I know today was a lot about the NIL clearinghouse and what NIL deals would actually be approved versus ones that have been happening that would not be approved. So it's been a wide variety of topics. But the thing that I really like about this is you get, if you're a local media member, you get, these coaches, a lot of them one-on-one. I mean, I talked to Brent one-on-one for a little bit today, and then also just a very small group yesterday. Porter Moser, I got one-on-one this week, and he was really good. Jenny Baranchek. So Joe C., I've spent a lot of time talking to him. So in that aspect, it's great because you get to talk to these people that are typically, are in press conference settings. It's not like that down here.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
Yeah, and I mean, day one, I think even before you got there, Greg Sankey had some media availability, and he came out with some pretty strong statements, basically setting the stage for what I think everyone else feels like is the SEC trying to grab every inch of power that they possibly can by mentioning I think the biggest thing that made the most waves was him saying you're valued more for not losing than who you play, or something to that effect.
Yeah, he's been pretty fiery this week, I would say. He's taken a few shots at other conferences, and as basically said, he's only worried about the SEC. The thing about this is, you can tell how much power the SEC has, and they know it. These coaches know it. The athletic directors know it. I mean, Chris Del Conte was pretty fiery today, talking to the media as well, and just kind of his thoughts on what should and shouldn't happen. But what's interesting is talking to some of the national media here, they've basically implied even if what the SEC wants isn't what everybody else wants, they usually get what they want. So they're pretty public about their opinions. I mean, even Brent, to an extent, was more public about his opinion on what should happen with the football calendar than I've ever heard him. I mean, he flat out said that when he wants just one portal and what it should look like. And I don't think he's ever really said that. He's usually pretty focused on his team and what he can control, and he said that as well. But he was even pretty opinionated, because I think that these guys know how influential their opinions are on this stuff, and I think Sankey kind of feeds into that.
And Eddie, I remember this distinctly from the first time when we went to Nashville before OU was even officially in the SEC, but we went to the SEC media days just to kind of get a feel and basically to talk to people about OU and Texas getting ready to join the league. Just going into that hotel downtown in Nashville and all the how the SEC had taken over that hotel and the SEC network was set up. And the vastness of the stage and the ballroom, like coming from the Big 12, it felt completely more monstrous. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, this is a lot more like what I would envision the NFL being. Like these guys, as to George's point about the power that the SEC wields, like they have turned themselves into their own league and into their own sport almost. With everything that they've done and using ESPN in the way they do it, using Paul Feinbaum. I don't know if you saw the Lane Kiffin Paul Feinbaum interview, but it was fantastic.
No.
But to all those points, the SEC is the big elephant in the room that's really hard to ignore.
Yeah. Confirmed. I agree.
As to why Sankey is, being so strong-willed or whatever. Or
he's being a good commissioner. I think it's a lot of times like we see
domineering.
With these, university presidents, and people get upset about the way that they act. They're looking out for their own ass, and to a certain extent, I think the commissioner of all the major sports, whether it be Adam Silver or Rob Manfred, they're looking out for the people that employ him, the teams or the schools.
Well, and
yeah,
guys, answer me this question: what conference between the Big Ten and the SEC tends to be heard the loudest? I mean, to me, because
I think it depends on where you're at.
Yeah, it might.
Are you in the
but
South
to me,
or are you up north?
The Big Ten has had so much change in commissioners and things like that. The SEC, the Big Ten did act quickly and added Oregon and Washington and other schools, and UCLA and USC. But at the same time, I don't really get the sense that they've had a lot of, they don't get much credit for kind of shaping policy of the NCAA and college football in general compared to the SEC. That's my thought. I don't know what you guys think.
To be completely honest, I don't keep up with it enough to even know who's responsible for that kind of stuff.
I agree with Kerry, because even this week, like, Greg Sankey's kind of made it clear that this idea that they want the 4-4-2-1 format for the playoff, and that there's this idea that that's the SEC's thing. I don't, talking to people down here, and even Sankey has said it, that's not something that is like their preferred choice. I actually think that there's a chance they end up preferring the 5+11 because they could get even more teams in to the playoffs. So I do think that Sankey and the SEC have the most pool right now. I think the Big Ten's right there, though. I mean, I just think the SEC's more brash about it.
Yeah,
they're willing to. Greg Sankey's willing to get up there and take shots at other conferences. I just don't think the Big Ten and their leaders. I think the Big Ten views themselves, as just a. I don't even know how to say this, but almost like they're smarter than people.
But let's also look at it this way, George. The SEC has the best media partner. I mean, the Big Ten has shut itself off from ESPN, so they don't get mentioned as much as the ESPN does, or as the SEC does on ESPN, and that's a big factor in shaping the opinion of the public that's out there.
Yeah, and that's one thing I do. You mentioned earlier about media days, which happened in July, is such a made-for-TV event. This really isn't, other than the Feinbaum show. This is, you've got about 1 to 2 media members per team that are like local reporters that come. And there's some schools like Vanderbilt or even Missouri, I don't think had any local people here this week. But the rest are, 10 to 15 of the biggest, national media names that So there's only about 20-ish media, 30 media members here. But there's not a whole lot of TV going on here. Which is interesting. It's a very exclusive.
Well, it's set
event.
up. I mean, for people that don't know, it's set up to basically allow one reporter from each outlet that they decide to credential, and it's not always easy. I mean, George, I remember the first year you put in for it really early, and they put you on a wait list. And so George had to sit there and wait to find out if he was going to be able to go to SEC Media Days.
And I had to have somebody put in a good word for me from OU.
Eventually, OU went to the SEC and said, George and Sooner Scoop are people that, cover us well, and we would like for them to be there. And so you ended up there. But, there's only 2 people from Oklahoma media there that were there this week, which is
I will say, though, Texas is the most well-represented. They had, I want to say, 6 people local media here. No other team is even close to that. Now, I will AL.com, who covers Alabama and Auburn and really just the SEC in general. They probably had 4 different reporters here. So they, the state of Alabama is pretty well represented. But yeah, only 2 people from the OU media group.
Sooner Scoop and Tulsa World. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So outside of that, we want to get into kind of the specifics and the beat writer side of things, and you talking to Brent and even some. I know you've had some discussions with Joe Castiglione, but want to remind you guys. And Will, I apologize. I totally screwed this up. Eddie, totally. I mean, I felt like a moron. But Will sent me a text message and said, "Hey, we're coming to the game on Saturday," and I thought he was talking about the Super Regional softball. He was talking about the Thunder game. I'm talking about Will from Cody Drug RX. Look, you don't have to mess with Schmitty in the summertime to get in better shape or feel your best. If you're looking for more energy, better focus, or just want to stay ahead of the game, check out NAD Plus injections from Cody Drug. This is the next big thing. Tons of Hollywood celebrities doing it. They're talking about it all over social media. But you can just stay right at home. You don't have to run off to LA in the middle of the night to feel better. It's quick. It's easy. Just head to CodyDrugRx.com, book a short telehealth visit, and your NAD Plus injection or nasal spray ships out the very next business day. And they can do that because they custom compound everything in their state-of-the-art sterile lab, including specialized medication for men's health, weight loss, anti-aging, and more. So go check them out at CodyDrugRx.com. They also love working with Oklahoma med spas and clinics. So if you're in healthcare, they're ready to team up. Just check them out at CodyDrugRx.com. And also, I don't know if Will has great vision or not, but if he doesn't, Eddie knows how to get him taken care of.
Yeah, and he would save a lot of money doing it. All you got to do is go to enjoyvision.com. That is the letter NJOY vision.com. Right now they're giving $1,000 off LASIK. You can enjoy the freedom of life without glasses or contacts. You don't want to miss life's perfect moments or a game's perfect plays. So all you got to do is go in and get LASIK if you can't see. Enjoyvision.com. $1,000. Start seeing the good all around you. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIKs.
All right. Now, as far as talking to Brent Venables, and even if you want to go into some Jenny Baranczyk or Porter Moser discussions that you've had down there, I know they've been down there as well. People don't know the basketball coaches do go. The football coaches, Joe Castiglione goes. Jim Nagy is not there, correct? No, correct. These GMs have filtered into this at this point. But let's just start with Brent Venables and kind of the interesting things that you took, or what was kind of item 1 and maybe 1A on your list that you discovered while talking to Brent this week.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of team-specific stuff, obviously the news about Jaden Gibson and Giovanni Gibson, he's hopeful that they'll be ready to go by the beginning of the season. What does that mean, beginning of the season? Any normal person would take that as season opener, but we know how that goes with Brent sometimes in terms of injury updates. And I think he honestly doesn't want to put a date on it because you just never know. But those guys are on track, which is good news. Other than that, I would say just the way he talked about Jadyn Ott, and what he brings to the table, his explosiveness, being a home run hitter. That's just not a player that they've had at running back really since Eric Gray. I think obviously Ott's better than Eric Gray even when he's healthy. So that was good. I put a story out today about what he said about John Mateer. I thought his comments were pretty revealing, and obviously he's going to say good things about him. But I actually went back and looked because I had some people in my comments saying, well, what did he say about Jackson Arnold last year at spring meetings? And it definitely was not the same answer, I would say. There's a lot more compliments for John Mateer. And again, I don't think that's any shade at Jackson Arnold. I just get the sense from Brent that, like, the leadership, the confidence, his ability as just a player and having done it before, I think really presented itself in the spring, and that he feels very, very good about who they have at quarterback. I mean, he talked at length about, if this team wants to win a lot of games, compete for a college football playoff spot, they have to have elite quarterback play. And he essentially said they believe they have an elite quarterback in John Mateer, which I think is a great sign. Offensive line, that was the other thing, unprompted. No one asked him about the offensive line. He just unprompted started listing guys and basically said that it's in a lot better spot than it was a year ago. They feel really good about the guys that are back and the talent that they've brought in, freshmen and transfers. So I thought that was a good sign. And then today, I thought, guys, he gave a really revealing answer about the cornerback depth. I wanted to ask him about that because I didn't get a chance yesterday. But he basically said that the reason they didn't go after a corner in the transfer portal is because they feel really good about Jacoby Johnson. They feel really good about Eli Bowen, and they feel really good about Gentry Williams. And I think that's a really good sign that they think Gentry is going to be healthy and play this year. And he also just said flat out the market was too expensive, and they didn't have essentially the resources, or they didn't want to use their resources that they had on that position because they feel so good about the corners they have. I thought that was really interesting. He kind of just, bluntly told me that they wanted to use their money elsewhere because they're that confident in the corners they have right now.
Yeah, I did, just kind of see what you had, or you kind of relayed that to us. And I do think there is a certain level of, sure, it'd be great if we could have got one of the corners out of the market, but they were very expensive. Like, we don't have unlimited money, which is something I know people don't like hearing, but it's the truth.
Oh, and the guys that were there, they simply weren't going to come in and beat out the guys that they think that they have starting right now. So why spend the money?
That's the crazy thing to me, is because if you're saying the market's expensive and knowing what was there, that's wild. Like, I mean, that just tells you how much some probably did overpay in the corner market, because there weren't a lot of special talents out there in the spring.
There were a couple of guys.
I thought that was a positive quote from Brent in terms of roster building, and he talked about that multiple times in terms of they didn't want to overspend at positions they felt good about, and I think that's a pretty good approach. And he also said their whole focus, and we've talked about this at length, but it was just kind of reassuring to hear him kind of talk about it, is the retention. Is they feel like, and even Joe Castiglione brought it up in several questions to him, they feel like the players they have coming back, the guys that they were able to keep on its roster, whether that's an R. Mason Thomas, Robert Spears Jennings, Kip Lewis, David Stone, which I asked Brent about as well. They feel like these guys are going to be really good players. Even a Jaden Gibson, they think that he is going to be a key contributor. Now we have to wait and see how he returns from his injury, but they really feel like they've got probably the best roster that they've had top to bottom under Venables, and they do feel like there's a lot of positive momentum. Now, obviously they're going to say that to you, so how much do you really believe? But I do think that Brent is feeling somewhat good about this group and wanting to prove it this year.
And I would say the one player, and we don't know because he hasn't seen him with everybody else, but it seemed like his comments on Jermichael Carter were kind of above and beyond a lot of comments he made on individuals.
Yeah, he really likes Jermichael Carter, and I didn't realize he had the connection to Jermichael's position coach at McNeese is Michael Smith, who he played with at Kansas State. So there was a bit of a connection there. But yeah, he thinks that Jermichael is a guy that can really come in and help him this year, but even in 2 years. And he talked about that, about having guys that they brought in the transfer portal that have multiple years. And I even would go a step further, Kerry, and say his comments on Whit Neubauer, and I put them in the the story today with John Mateer, as well as his comments on Michael Hawkins. I mean, he flat out said this is the best quarterback room that he feels like he's probably had in his tenure at OU, and it's because of obviously John Mateer, but they feel like Michael Hawkins took a big step this offseason and has really been coached up well, which I don't think could be said a year ago. And then they think they got a steal in Whit Neubauer, and I think a lot of people thought that was just a throwaway take, and maybe it ends up being he never plays a snap at Oklahoma. But I was kind of taken back when Brent kind of praised him the way that he did. I mean, they feel like they got a guy that can actually play the position.
I feel like sometimes when it comes to the transfer portal, OU social media is a little bit like NBA social media, where they just say a bunch of shit but don't really know what they're talking about. Like, we think that Cole Gonzalez is going to be a decent quarterback. I mean, he might win that starting job at Pittsburgh. I mean, it was clear they wanted a guy that could at least come in there. And look, Cole Gonzalez was a veteran. Whit Neubauer's got a lot of years left. And, he mentioned multiple year transfers as something that they're putting an emphasis on to you. But they want to have really good quarterbacks. I mean, it's not like they don't want to get into a Davis Bevel situation like they got into, several years ago when Dylan Gabriel went down.
Yeah, and again, the quote I can't. I'll see if I can pull it up. But the quote he had about the quarterback room compared to last year, I thought was kind of revealing in terms of what they feel like they have there. Let me try and see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, a guy that with his addition, we've made that quarterback room better than at any point in time we were a year ago, which is, again, I don't think he's like trying to take a shot at Jackson Arnold, but it is what it is. I mean, they've got a lot more experience in that room and just flat out more talent in terms of guys they feel like can come in and play for them.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I also wondered this, George, like just with the comments overall being so tilted toward the offense from Brent, I wonder if what he went through last year and the regret, and I know the just the feelings he had that it went the way that it did offensively. Like, is he kind of sticking his nose? Not that he's making decisions, but is he keeping an eye closer on that offensive side of the ball? Because really, it's kind of played off like everybody feels good about the defense. Like, we're not really worried about not that he's saying that, but you don't really hear anybody questioning, okay, well, maybe we aren't, somebody goes down at corner, maybe we are in trouble. I mean, maybe we don't have enough depth at linebacker if something goes down. If Kendall Daniels doesn't work out at Cheetah and Kendall Dolby isn't ready to go. I'm not trying to start the Doom podcast here, but I'm just saying.
I stand ready.
I was just saying you could poke some holes in this defense. I mean, without a Billy Bowman and a Danny Stutzman.
Yeah, I will say he did, because no one asked him about the defense. But he had like an 8-minute answer on a question I had, and he kind of got into the defense a little bit. And the one thing that he said, and what gives him confidence that they're going to be good on defense, is how many guys they have on that side of the ball that have been here all 4 years. Mm-hmm. And I think he called them the Dandy Dozen or something of guys that were in that recruiting class, his first recruiting class that, I think are still with the program. I can't remember, but he started listing off, Robert Spears Jennings, Grayson Halton, R. Mason Thomas, Kip Lewis, Kobe McKenzie, like these guys that have been in the program now for 4 years, they feel really good about. And then even today, the way he glowed about a guy like Jacoby Johnson in his third year. And he mentioned, guys going into their third year that could be big players for him, whether it's, a Taylor Wine or PJ Adebaraway. I think he feels really good about the defense and kind of the depth they've built up there and the young guys they have. And I would also say, Kerry, kind of going off that, I asked him today about his trust in Ben Arbuckle, and kind of being the head coach of the offense, because there has been so much talk about the offense and, Brent kind of overhauling that side of the ball. He said to me today, he said, I think any head coach would tell you that the side of the ball that they're not as involved in, that there has to be tremendous level of trust with the ability to have input at any point in time. And that gives you a lot of comfort as a coach when you have that. And so I thought that was an interesting quote. And then he also talked about how big it is having Kevin Wilson on staff to kind of help. And he sort of implied to me that he's going to have a very similar role that Matt Wells had back in 2023, where, he's helping with the offense, maybe help manage the game a little bit. But instead of, Matt Wells was helping a lot with the quarterbacks, I think Kevin Wilson is primarily going to be helping with the offensive line. But I do think that Kevin Wilson has been a pretty big addition for them in terms of somebody having head coach experience and also being somebody that Brent can rely on in the middle of games if he's busy helping with the defense.
I think with Kevin, like, he went through some stuff at Ohio State. Remember they brought Mike Yurcich in there, and he kind of got demoted a little bit, but like he has that experience of knowing how to step back and let a guy do his thing when he's in charge. Like, I don't think that will be an issue with Kevin Wilson if he has any input, how he has input, when it's needed. I think, you would hope that Ben Arbuckle would be a guy that would just say, hey, what do you think about this from time to time? Or what do you think about this? Instead of just getting to a point where things are not going well and you have to say, can you help me?
Yeah. And Brent said today that the best quality of Kevin Wilson is that he's brutally honest.
Yeah, he is.
And that he will tell you straight. He basically will tell you straight up if he thinks what you're doing is stupid. So I think that
although he sometimes thinks that people in the Air Force dig foxholes. So sometimes you.
I don't know what that means,
says.
but I do think when Brent told me that today, I kind of thought in my head, you probably could have used a little bit of that last year. With what was going on offense.
But wasn't that way we heard that Seth was resistant to any kind of outside input?
I think his head was buried in the sand a little bit last year. And so, I think this is all good stuff. It's just one of those things, guys. And I kind of said this on the show yesterday when Eddie asked me about, what's the feel amongst the national media towards Oklahoma right now. And I would just say it's a mixed bag. I think that people are very curious to see how does OU fare this year, because they were not good a year ago. They've made a lot of big changes on paper that look great, but are they going to work out? Is it all going to click? And with the schedule they have, it might click extremely well, but is that enough to get them to 9 wins, which I do think would get them in the playoff? I think that's kind of how the media feels about Oklahoma right now. Is is this all going to work out? And if it doesn't, what happens to, Brent Venables, which was another interesting conversation I had yesterday with Joe C. And credit to Barry Trammell, kind of asking the question of what is the hierarchy? What is the structural organization in terms of Jim Nagy, Joe Castiglione, and Brent Venables, who has the final call on, big decisions, and especially, if you've got to make a head coaching change. And I think that, I won't reveal everything that Joe C said because I'm going to write about it, but I do think Jim Nagy would have a lot of say in, what's going to happen with the football program moving forward. And that's, of course, if shit really hits the fan. But it's a very interesting time, I would say, in the program. There's a lot going on, and Joe C said it yesterday. They're putting all their chips in this year. Not that they weren't in the past, but they feel like surrounded Brent Venables with all the tools to be successful this year.
And you were there to hear Brent talk about it, but one of the first things you wrote about from out there was his relationship with Jim Nagy and how they get along. Did you sense that it's a real, genuine partnership that has a lot of respect in both directions? Or is this, is there still a sense that maybe Brent's learning how to tolerate somebody that has input on player evaluations and things like that?
I definitely think there's a part of Brent that's learning to let go, which I think is always hard for a head football coach, especially in college football. But it does seem like the process has been very collaborative, which is good. And I think that there's definitely been some times where, Jim Nagy and his front office staff might view a player that they want to recruit differently than how, the staff does, the coaching staff. And I think they've been, having to work through some of that. But in terms of their relationship, I do think that it's been very good. I think that, like I said, there's a learning curve for everybody in this, especially like Brent made a good point talking about, he goes, we've hired a lot of, NFL guys and they're great. They can really see talent, but they're having to adjust themselves to, okay, a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old isn't a final product. So you have to view the player or the person as a bigger picture. Like, what could they be when they're 20? Whereas a lot of these NFL scouts have been, they've been scouting guys that are, 23 years old and
almost finished products. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that that's been an adjustment, and having those type of conversations, I think, has probably been good. But you're seeing it play out in recruiting. It's pretty clear that there's probably been some differences of opinions when it comes to who they're recruiting. And that's maybe why some of the recruiting has slowed down a little bit. And there's also been a bunch of new names, introduced late in the 26 class. But Brent did say that they feel really good about where they think they can close this class, and as well as what they think they can get in the 27 class. So I just think it's one of those things that's going to take some time. And again, Jim Nagy, and Brent said this too, Jim Nagy spent most of his time trying to just hire his staff as well. So I think that it's just been a lot up in the air at once right now.
Well, and I think that's a good thing to bring Josh in here on, because this morning, Josh, we were over in Fort Gibson. We're looking at a guy that's got a great frame, but you don't look at him immediately and say, okay, that's going to be a guy that's going to start within the first couple of years. You don't know. I mean, the ceiling is very high, but a lot of things have to happen for these NFL GM guys to see what he could eventually be when he gets to college. Yeah. I'm talking about Cooper Hackett.
Yeah, you don't see that body type in NFL circles. Like, they wouldn't know what to do with that guy.
I mean, not even a defensive end at this point. It's a tight end body.
Absolutely.
At best.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Absolutely. And, you think of like what a project looks like in the NFL, and it's for OU fans, like a Wanye Morris. Like, he's played some ball. We haven't seen a lot of him. We don't know exactly what he is, but we kind of know he's talented. But Wanye was 6'5" and 320 pounds and was a man. Like, it was different. So I think that was a really interesting point. And I do think there, from whether there has been or hasn't been, there should be some give and take of ideas, because a lot of these guys do have NFL backgrounds and don't, and not to say that they don't know, but they're not as familiar with evaluating a high school player and what that looks like. And especially, guys, you look through, and this, we all know my offensive line obsession, but guys like Cooper Hackett, those are the guys that become NFL guys. It's not the 320-pound high school kid, or at least not most of the time. The guys who go on and become great are the Lane Johnsons that were high school quarterbacks and bounced around. And, you look
untapped athleticism.
Yeah, you look at Jason
size.
Kelsey, was recruited as a linebacker, eventually moved to center. And he's told the story of he thought his coach was insane when he put the idea to him. And he's like, well, okay, let me try and work through this. And then eventually, obviously, becomes a probable Hall of Famer.
We're going to talk to a guy named George Kittle later today, who we both watched at Norman High School.
Yeah.
A skinny receiver who ends up being one of the most physically dominant tight ends in the National Football League.
I would love to tell you I saw that coming. I did not see that coming. So, but yeah, and I, again, we can get into Cooper a little bit more, but that's just kind of something. And you see it at all positions. Like there are corners that are 150 pounds that are extremely talented, but they're going to need time. They don't know how to do anything yet. And even like beyond when you get into understanding what you're doing, just like the basics of the position, there are lots of really talented high school kids that have no idea what they're doing. Like just don't know hand placement, don't know the proper technique. Kerry, the one I always go back to, this guy is now a college coach. Do you remember when Chuka and Dulaway showed up to camp and Jackie Shipp was having to tell him how to step?
Yeah.
Like use his first step.
Because it was so ironic. He spoke 7 different languages, but he couldn't master English. Or he couldn't master football. The language of football he couldn't master.
And so and I remember wow, like this guy's got a long way to go. Chuka ended up being a really solid, multi-year starter for Oklahoma. So you've got to have that concept of there is... Sure, this guy is not anywhere near where he can help us, but if we can teach this guy in 3 years, he might be something, kind of transformational.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to, George, hearing Brent talk so glowingly about Jadyn Ott, which he was a guy that we'd kind of heard, and you don't know if this was true or not, but maybe that was kind of one of the first guys that Jim Nagy targeted when he came in here. And if there was going to be some tension or friction, it probably would have been with those first guys that he targeted and said, I want this guy. And maybe staff members did feel like, okay, what's going on here? Why don't we have more of a say in this? Why is this guy in our running back room when we like our running back room? But for Brent, obviously he sees, if there were friction, he sees what Jim Nagy saw and just talking about how he's going to be a different type of running back than what they have on the roster now.
Well, yeah, and you even look at the stats. I mean, I think Brent, isn't naive. He knows that they haven't been explosive enough at that position, and he said that yesterday. Even, in 2023 when they finished top 10 in nearly every category on offense, they just didn't have that explosive running back. And, I put some of the stats in my story, but, they only had 16 runs over 20-plus yards last year, and I think that ranked towards the bottom of the country. But Jadyn Ott alone has 60-something in his career of 20-plus runs. This is a guy that can really go, and once he gets loose, he's gone. And they just haven't had somebody that can make people miss in space, and that's something that we hear Brent say all the time is their running backs need to make people miss in space. And I think they do like their running back room, and Xavier Robinson, Taylor Tatum, Javonte Barnes, Torrey Blaylock, who Brent mentioned, I think can all have a role, but they need a featured back like they did back in 22 with Eric Gray. And I think Brent, knows that they got that in Jadyn Ott and that he could be a big difference maker for him. And it goes back to they felt like their resources that they have were more important to invest in somebody like that than a corner, which wasn't a great market in the spring and would have been, probably as expensive as a running back would have, that wouldn't have as big of a difference on your roster.
His ass better be on the field.
Eddie, I'm sorry. Anyone that hesitated about taking Jadyn Ott as long as it could work in the numbers, I don't know what you're looking at. I don't know what you haven't seen in Jadyn Ott and what you have seen and what's there. And I like Xavier Robinson. I think Taylor Tatum has a ton of potential. Those guys haven't proven anything in the way this guy has. And
I don't think that they will or that they won't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's going to be the starter.
It's not just Jadyn Ott. It's, it's the Michaela kid. It's Baklenko. I think that's going to be another thing, just human nature. How is Bill Bedenbaugh going to look at those guys when he's been in the homes of all these kids and recruited them? And if it's neck and neck, are you going to play are you going to play a younger guy over a senior when you're going to get more years out of him? There's and you can call it politics if you want, but that's essentially what it is. How guys get their spots, win their spots, compete for their spots. That's one of those things that you're always going to have to battle in the locker room when you have a personnel department and a coaching staff that are both doing the same job, which is recruiting and evaluating and signing.
I think it's also something that we talk about a lot, though, too, that when Jadyn Ott shows up in the first day of practice, if he has a really good practice, those guys are going to know who's the better running back.
They're going to be like, yeah, he's just better than I am.
Just like a quarterback. They know who the guy is.
Yeah, I mean, those guys, they know, like, okay, this guy's something different. But
it's guys, the parents that don't know.
It's not any different. And, hey, let's work a shameless thunder plug in here. But it's not different than what Sam Presti has to do. Like, with all these draft picks, all these decisions he's going to have to make in the coming years, you're going to have to make some tough calls. Like, does Lou Dort get to stay forever? Probably not. Like, there comes
well, nobody's like, oh, Caruso's just a hired gun. Like, no, Caruso's helping us win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, and that's fine. And then in 3 years from now, the team's probably going to look different. And it's the same thing with OU, where within that you get to evolve. And, okay, maybe you don't have a Jadyn Ott at running back every year, but, hey, we found a really great guy at receiver to balance out those touches and to make us a little more explosive in that way. And you're just constantly tinkering with it.
I did want to, before we move on, I wanted to read this one short quote from Brent about recruiting that I thought was pretty good. And it's nothing new, but I thought it was good. He said, in a perfect world, we want to be closer to that 80-20, 75-25 high school to portal. Recruit the most elite talent in all of college football and do it through the trenches. Then build a program on development and loyalty. I thought that was, again, he's said stuff like that before, but I think that 80-20 is probably about right, what they want to do in terms of, continuing to recruit at a high level. And I thought, him saying it, through the trenches, I think is pivotal too.
And I think that goes back to what you were talking about earlier when he's not concerned about the defense because he's got the whatever dozen. I don't know if Todd Bates must have come up with that name. He's got the guys that have been there for 4 years. Like, he likes that continuity. He doesn't want a team full of mercenaries. He wants a good locker room. He wants guys that know each other and like each other and play for each other.
Well, and it's a model that makes sense. Like, I broke it down after the national title game because there has been this. I would say it's a very small group, but there are OU fans who are like, no, just focus on the portal. Make the portal what you do. Don't even worry about high school quarterback recruiting. Go get your quarterbacks in the portal. Look at Ohio State and Notre Dame. Now, and I know people immediately say, well, both those quarterbacks are in the portal. Okay, that's fine.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
80% of their 22-man starting rosters were from high school, were guys they recruited, they developed, and they built through their program. There's no question. You use the portal as a supplementary thing, and you go find guys who can help you, can make you better. But if you're going to have continuity and year over year be a successful program, you have got to build through high school. I don't see. Look at Florida State. Sure, they had that great year a couple years ago. They cratered last year, and Mike Norvell, who just signed a massive contract, is in real jeopardy going into this year and counting on a quarterback that Boston College let loose of.
Yeah.
The model for Oklahoma, in my opinion, is 2023 Michigan. I mean, that Michigan team, and it took Jim Harbaugh, and I'm not saying you give Brent Venables this amount of time. It took Jim Harbaugh a long time to build up that program to what it needed to be. But, you look at that roster, and it was built through the high school recruiting, and Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they had just a ton of top 10 classes. They certainly didn't have a bunch of top 5 classes. I know this 26 class isn't going to be a top 10 class, but if you can get some just really solid classes and then develop those guys and they stick around for 3 or 4 years, which you're starting to see at Oklahoma, you're starting to see guys stick around for several years. That's ultimately what Brent's trying to do, and I think that's probably the right direction to take. The problem for OU is they're about to play maybe the toughest schedule in school history this next year, and I was telling some of the media people here, I was like, because they've asked me, do you think Oklahoma's going to be good? And I said, I do. I think Oklahoma's going to be good next year, but good could be 7-5 or 8-4, and that's not good enough at Oklahoma, every year. So I just think that that's the part that it's hard to grasp what this team can be versus, how tough this schedule is going to be, no matter how good they are.
All right, we're going to have some recruiting reports and things to get a lot more in depth in this, but Josh has been touring the state for the last couple of days, just going wall to wall. Let's just talk a little bit about kind of what you've seen so far. Of course, I mentioned that we saw Cooper Hackett this morning over at Fort Gibson. This coming off of seeing Bo Bentley, a couple of weeks ago down in Salina, but I know Jinx was scheduled for today, but they changed their practice time. A lot of guys there that you wanted to have a look at. But day one, let's go back to yesterday, kind of what stood out to you? What did you really learn maybe that you might not have known?
I would say probably the thing that I took away is
Bixby's going to be good.
Yeah, I really wanted to avoid the low hang, but I mean that's dead.
Yeah, first let's mention the teams you went and saw yesterday.
Yeah, so started off at Bixby, then moved over to Rejoice Christian in Owasso. Had never been up there before. That was a first-time visit. Then made my way over to Broken Arrow, and obviously all the roster turnover they've had there. Guys coming, guys going, and then ended up at Stillwater. I would say 4 teams that literally they could be in that conversation to hoist gold balls, like come the winner. Like those are really talented teams. That's a ton to ask of Broken Arrow because, like I said, they are going through a complete overhaul. But Travis Hill is one of the best coaches in the state.
State championship head coach, multiple places.
Yeah, you win a state title at East Central, you can coach. Like I mean, like that's all there is to that.
Shout out Stan Von Taylor.
Yeah, I love Stan Von. That's my guy. But no, there are so many things that work for all of those programs. But Bixby. I was crazy talking to Braden Presley, and we'll have this interview coming up. And Braden was like, "Yeah, we really want to make the season, like we want to get things back on track." And you're like, "Back on track? You won state last year." And he's like, "We lost 2 games in the regular season for the first time in like 10 years." And you're like, "Holy crap!" Like Bixby's just living on a different planet than most other teams. So, and they're loaded. I mean, Trey McLaughlin that's going to Oklahoma State. They got people forget about Emery Snyder that's committed to West Virginia. It's a really good safety. I mean, guys, he's 6'4", 205. Both he and McLaughlin, I'm like, if things fell right, it wouldn't shock me at all if Oklahoma gave those guys a call in like November and we're like, hey, we kind of had a space open up if you'd like to come take a look kind of thing. So, that's just me spitballing. But then you look at Caden Penny, the 2027 offensive line offer that is unbelievably good. All the stuff you're looking for. Natural bend, ankle flexion, all the explosion. Is he another guy, though, kind of like we're talking about with Cooper? As he gets bigger, as he gets stronger, you're going to see a very different player.
A man of very few words.
Yes. Yeah.
Very quiet.
And it was kind of one of those deals where, like, I'm trying to get him laughing, and he was having none of that. Now, to be fair, we were doing that interview at about 7:40 in the morning.
Oh, he probably just woke up then.
Yeah. So he might not have been game at that point in time. Also talked to Braden Presley, like I said, and Braden, I thought one of the interesting things that came out of that was Braden talking about what position he might play. And I don't want, kind of like George earlier, I don't want to ruin what he talked about, but he has a clear position he'd like to play, and it sounds like Oklahoma is at least going to give him the opportunity, if he does come to Oklahoma, to just let it play out and kind of see, like, are you better at corner, you better at safety, and let it kind of.
And what was he wearing when you talked to him?
He wasn't an Oklahoma State shirt. That was, and I kind of teased him. I was like, "Man, that's going to make a lot of fans for you, Braden." And he was like, "I didn't know," and he didn't. Like, Caden and I had set it up about a week before, but Braden, I was just like, maybe I can sneak this in too, and we made that work. So
it's kind of a two-parter. Like, do I think he ends up at Oklahoma State? Probably.
Yeah.
But I do think the way that he talked about it, and you can watch the interview and we'll go over it in the recruiting report, but I don't get the impression that it's a lock. Like, he's got to look around.
Yeah, I think he is sincere in that he doesn't want to be, kind of seen that way.
Yeah. But it's hard. I mean, your brother's the all-time leading wide receiver in school history.
You've grown up going to his games.
I mean, to be fair, I guess Braylon did leave. I mean, he's over at Tulsa now, but we'll see.
Well, and
he's impressive too. He was really good in the state championship game.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that I don't know if it's just because he's like his brothers were so prolific and they put up such huge numbers, and Braden being a DB and kind of he's going to play a lot of receiver too. Like, they clearly are going to make him. They're going to get some passes thrown his way this year. But at the same time, like his numbers are never going to be like his brothers. And so I think people kind of like, oh, he must not be as good. I think he's the best prospect of the three, but he plays in a position that's not going to shine quite as much. So, I think that's interesting. But to kind of take that and pivot a little bit, we're talking about him having to fight that idea of, oh, he's just going to go to OSU. I was over at Stillwater last night and talked to David Thomas, the big 2028 receiver. Already has OU, K-State, Oklahoma State. I mean, like he's a legit contender to be the number one guy in the state in the class of 28, and he is unbelievably good. I was talking to him and talking to his coach. He was telling me about the game. He goes, if you ever want to go watch David's tape, watch the Choctaw tape. And he goes, first half he has like one catch for 4 yards. In the third quarter, he had 4 catches for like 135 yards against Choctaw, who, for those at home that don't remember, Choctaw went on to win the state championship. This is a very good team. And he was like, we didn't get him the ball in the fourth quarter. Probably, it was kind of we'll fix that this time around. But this is a guy, his first high school catch he takes for a touchdown against Tulsa Union. So, he is a special talent and didn't get to go last night. I didn't get to watch him, but he did talk about being from Stillwater, and every coach that talks to him is like, do we really have a chance? Like, are you really going to do anything? Because his dad is a staffer at Oklahoma State, so there is some real connection there. Again, David, I just get the impression that he's a guy that wants to go do whatever's best for him. He sees it as a business decision. Now, that's not to say that, of course, I'm sure in a perfect world he'd like to go play where his dad is and spend that time and that kind of stuff. But I do think he's more open than maybe his location would make you think.
Well, and I'll say this: Oklahoma State seems to really have stepped their game up NIL-wise, but maybe that's one of those things where if it's all things are equal, OU can offer a little bit more.
Yeah, and
if he's a guy they truly want in that fashion.
Yeah, and going around the state, I will say, and I know OU fans don't want to hear this, but when I talk to players, OSU is doing a better job than they've done at any point in the last decade as far as connecting to players, because there were so many times when you'd go see a guy that you knew OSU should be all over, and they're like, yeah, they talk to me some, or it's kind of hit and miss, and you're like, man, you guys should be killing it for this guy. And they'd let that guy get out of state and he'd go be a good player somewhere else. And it seems like they've kind of recognized that, and you're not seeing those
maybe
errors.
That's part of Mike Gundy finally giving Kenyatta Wright a little autonomy, because he's the guy whose name you keep hearing about that has really reshaped everything they're doing, which is being able to raise money, being able to offer kids, being able to make, like you said, that contact quicker.
And Kenyatta loves Oklahoma kids. I mean, he is one. His kids were recruited from the state. He really values that, and he thinks that's important. And I think at an SEC level, I still think most years there's probably only 8 to 12 guys. Maybe, and some years it might be less. It might be 6 in kind of leaner years that can really help Oklahoma and play at the level, or could eventually play at the level you need them to. But at OSU, I think the math's a little different. I do think there's a few more guys that maybe get overlooked that can help them, and they can be patient with it, because they really are. When OSU's at its best, they are a purely developmental program, and they find guys that other people didn't notice, and that's when they were so stinking good and such a problem. They found guys that got overlooked, and they turned them into, Justin Blackman is a perfect example. I mean, I know that the postscript on that hasn't gone well, but Justin Blackman was an incredible college player.
Okay, I know. We've been running around. We've been all over the state. George and Destin. Eddie's been cutting up a lot of video. Our new intern Andrew West has been out shooting stuff. So we're up against the clock here a little bit. But just in terms of, I know Stillwater, the guy you went to see was not playing last night,
David.
Just overall, can you kind of wrap up any other notables for us? And then, of course, like I mentioned, we'll have a full recruiting report, highlights with all these guys that you'll want to see, and Eddie and I and Josh will get together and produce those throughout the rest of the week. But just kind of wrapping up the recruiting trip after day 2, I guess.
Well, I want to make sure that people understand Caden Penny and Cooper Hackett are the best young offensive linemen I've seen at Oklahoma in a long time. I know, and somebody, I guess Twitter noted me that it was Bray Walker. We were talking about elite linemen,
I
and I left out Bray
gotcha.
Walker. Yeah, and they were right. Caden Penny and Cooper Hackett have more upside. I always had questions about Bray. There were things I wasn't sure
There was
about.
that was when Southmore was going through the whole transfer controversy all the time.
So, but what I do want to note is I got my first look at Camion Compton-Nero, a kid I've talked about a few times. I had some people in Tulsa were like, I've heard of him. I don't know him that well. And I think there's this idea that he's like 5'10". Guys, he's like 6'1". He's going to play quarterback for Rejoice Christian and is just an ultra athlete. Like I came away. I kind of talked last week with Eddie on the recruiting report. Like this guy could contend for the number 1 spot. That's legitimate. Like, and I say that thinking, just raving about David Thomas 5 minutes ago. Like he is very, very good. And the last guys I would talk about were Bryson Brown and Samaj Stanford, who have now Bryson Brown come over from Owasso to BA, and Samaj Stanford making the move from Jinx to BA. Both look like a million. I mean, you talk about like guys that Jim Nagy's going to look at and say, yeah, like those are guys. Like those are dudes that physically look the part. Samaj Stanford is one of the prettiest safeties. I like just watching him, his change of direction, his movement skills. I'm like, man, that guy. Yeah, that's well placed, George. He's really, really good. Bryson Brown. He's one of those guys where I don't always love like what I see in drills, but then I watch game tape and I'm like, guys, he's everywhere he's supposed to be. He's so consistent, and you can tell he works so hard technically. I like what I see, but again, like BA is going to be really, really interesting to watch how this whole kind of Frankenstein's monster they've built is going to work out, because you've got a lot of talent, you've got a great coaching staff. How does it all kind of come together?
By the way, we need to hit up Teddy Lehman to see if he's financing the drone program at Fort Gibson.
They were having some problems there. There were a few
the drone
issues.
was not. We might need to donate a little bit more money.
Yeah, they were having trouble with the lens, wouldn't move up and down. The guy was like flicking the lens.
I was like, we don't have helmets on. It was like right above us. I was like, I don't think this drone is very...
Yeah, they were having some issues for sure.
So Teddy, you might want to holler at your boys. They might need a new drone. All right. Also, Washington, I know Eddie went out there. You didn't, but you got to see some of the highlights, and you can see that on a recruiting report that we've already got out. But obviously, another Alexander, very impressive, and a quarterback that who knows where he ends up. Who knows what type of offers that he could get, but certainly one of the more impressive kids in the state.
One of the coaches from Washington, he saw the recruiting report when Eddie and I were talking on Monday, and sent me video of a throw that Creed Barrett, the quarterback you're talking about, had made against Metro in the state.
He was telling me about it when we were out there.
It's pretty impressive for a kid to just. I mean, he just slung it like 50 yards, hit this kid dead in stride as a high school freshman. It was pretty salty. And then you mentioned Case. Again, I think the idea everybody's got to get their head around is Case is a linebacker. Like I think it's hard because I hear Alexander. They know the bloodline, the whole thing. Case is a linebacker, and like
he looks good.
If he ended up in the top 100, I don't think that's out of the question. Like he's that talented.
All right, George, he is still in Destin. Anything to add before we get out of here? You're going to hit the beach after this, I'd imagine.
Yeah, maybe. I'm going to try and do maybe a couple more things for work because I leave tomorrow, and I'm going to have to spend some time in the airport and in the car. But no final words for me. Softball, big game tomorrow for them. And baseball, they start Friday?
Yeah. Friday afternoon, 4 o'clock.
A lot going on.
Stickball report is up. Go check that out as well. Fresh
we need to get credentialed for possibly the NBA Finals.
I could probably pull some strings for you. I don't know how good your seats would be. How close to the court.
I just want to be in the building.
How quickly does George get ejected, though? The second he dog cusses somebody for like a poor play.
At least a few seconds into the game. Possibly in warm-ups even.
You look like shit.
All right. Well, good luck to the Thunder tonight. Hopefully they can win and get a week off. Or maybe you want them to not have a week off so there's no chance of rust. But I'll take the
who are those people?
I'll take the win.
That would want them to lose.
The funny thing is they didn't play all that well coming out of that 7-game series. They really started to just put it on people like last night. And then they had the 40-point loss. So, yeah, I don't know that matters. Anyway. All right. Thanks for listening.
Make the finals. Go to the finals. You go to the finals every time.
I want to go to the finals just to meet Tyrese Halliburton's dad.
Him.
All right, that's going to do it. One last word for Eddie. All right, thanks, George. We look forward to hearing more of your reports from Destin. And Josh, your recruiting reports and recruiting information and all that. Lots of picks coming up as well. So thanks for listening. We'll be back next week for another edition of the Unofficial 40 podcast right here on Soonerscoop.com.